FM, Wellington Access Radio. This is Eddie. You're in the studio today with Eddie, Nani, and Leah. How's everyone's weekend going?
Oh, well, mine started off with a rip and a roar, watching The Boys. I love that show, and now it's coming out every Saturday morning, so that's a little plug for it.
It's like the adult equivalent of like people talk about Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah, I have my and it was so good, you know, like that's what it felt like. I've got my Saturday morning cartoon. Yeah, I'll lie in bed and watch this, and then I'll go about my day.
Yes, no, it's been a good week. Like last night I went to ACCW, had the African men's event
down in Courtney Place.
Yeah, that was cool.
The steakhouse.
Yeah, it was. I thought we almost had more food than we needed.
Really?
Is that possible?
I took like a box home with me for like for lunches and stuff.
Well done.
But it was a good time. Like it was like a real. I think it was good group.
Was it really like a manly bro sort of thing, or was it like we're going to sit down and talk about really important issues?
It was good. Like it was a mix of like, you know, obviously everyone having yarns and playing pool and having a drink. But then I think like there was a doctor there, so we obviously talked about like just health issues and mental health side of things.
Oh, wonderful.
And I think
great.
it was a good thing. And I think, you know, what everyone's doing is they want to see like more of those kind of events.
Yeah.
Like and trying to do like just having those spaces more regularly, just to kind of raise those issues and raise those topics, but also just chill out and have a beer.
Yeah.
Like, I have a question about that, which is that in women's spaces, black women's spaces, the stereotype, and there's some truth to it, is that we tend to talk over each other about mental health issues, but the stereotype in black men's spaces about mental health issues is that nobody talks. And I'm wondering, like, because I wasn't there, like, what was it like? Like, what was the vibe in terms of, like, people being willing to talk up about their mental health issues?
I think it was maybe not much people talking about themselves, but obviously talking about that kind of that cultural disconnect in some ways about, like, and being in a space where there is such an emphasis on mental health. And but also having to navigate those systems and talking about, obviously, from an institutional standpoint, how there might not be the same kind of mental health supports.
Yeah.
Accessible for African and black people, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
But having that sort of thing, but obviously recognizing the importance of it, and that was kind of something that was across the board, like across all the age ranges that were there, was how important it was. But also just trying to look at like how as a community people can build each other up.
Yeah.
And have those spaces, even if it's not to talk about like, even if it's not to kind of go really deep and serious on those sort of things, but just to those little things, be like, oh, like, how are you going? Oh, it's been rough.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it, or you know, is there anything I can help you out with?
Yeah.
Just be doing something, or like. So I think it was good. Like it was trying to kind of build at both levels. That kind of, you know, we need to destigmatize. You know, start things around. You know, official channels of support, like therapies and counselings and that sort of things. But also just like that kind of soft, kind of community level of just like just looking out for each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I think that was one of the things that also came up at the women's event too. It's about that destigmatization of mental health within the black community, and how, you know, often what's happened in the past is mental health has been weaponized.
Yes, exactly.
Towards different people, and instead of looking at it from a position of we should reach out and make sure, are you okay? You know, it's okay to ask that question. You know what I mean?
Just to make it to be okay to be not okay, and like okay to be okay, and like just to actually open up about it.
Just okay to be kind of.
Yeah, I'm meh today.
Yeah,
I might be a meh tomorrow.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It might be like on Wednesday.
Yeah. So we have a guest in today. Would you like to start the intro for that, Eddie?
Okay, so I guess today is a amazing poet. I published a book. I'm really excited to hear a lot about this. We have Khadro Mohamed.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Could you just start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into the questions and stuff in a minute, but like, you know, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. And
hello, I'm Khadro. I am 25. I am from Wellington. I come from refugee parents from Somalia. I am an extremely introvert. I used to be a very introverted child.
Yes. And
so I turned to storytelling to, I guess, connect and express myself. I am very expressive when I want to be. And ever since I was young, I just wrote stories and characters, and I got really lost in that, in the world of books. And from a young age, I knew in my heart that I was going to be a writer. Despite that, though, I went through school, excelled in English and history and anything to do with writing. Went into uni and decided to pursue biology.
Wow.
Wow.
It's a bit of a switch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, biomed actually, a genetics major.
Wow.
I enjoyed it very much, but it meant my creative energy was pretty much shot. And so I couldn't write as much as I used to. So I think naturally poetry kind of became home for me. So I turned to poetry because, one, it was easier to do. You could do it. You could write a poem really quickly. It didn't take a lot of energy. I could still get out what I wanted to get out. Because before I used to write novels, I would have to dedicate hours of my time. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I've written a few. I'd dedicate hours, a week to get a chapter done or something. University was just difficult, so I turned to poetry, and then as time went on, I realised poetry, I think, is the medium that I wanted to stay in. And I finished uni, and I went into libraries, like working in a library, and now I work for a ministry. But bio's kind of, not really in my life anymore.
Wow.
And then, a book happened. But I knew a book was going to happen one day. I just didn't think it was going to happen at 25.
Bro, oh, holy cow.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet another library baby. Like, just, like, the minute you get comfortable in a library, it's home. Forever.
It's the nicest feeling.
Right?
Yes,
Like that low hum in the background of people, like, talking, but, like, it's not loud, but it's soft and it's there. And it's, like, this gentle ambient, like...
Yeah, and I inhaled books so much when I was in the library. I was just, like, going through like 3 or 4 a week, and it was just lovely.
Yes,
and
exactly.
On the clock, because no one's going to tell you off.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, like, this is the audible before audible way of having an entire library, but not having to have a house to fit an entire library. So
yeah.
So I guess like obviously leading to this book, like what was like that was kind of the good overview, but I guess like specifically like what were the kind of influences leading to this specific book?
So this collection I put together over a few years, I think. From I would say from the age of 21 to 24 is like the pieces that I wrote. But what inspired the like putting them all together and creating this collection was my trip to Egypt in 2019. It's the first time I went back to Africa.
Okay.
And so I talk a lot about home and belonging and whakapapa, and because I felt very, very lost as a teenager. Kind of knew who I was in early 20s, but wasn't sure. Then I went to Egypt and was like, yep, I'm African. And then I came back and was like, I need to write it. And, so I wrote this collection.
Oh, that's a glorious story. Oh, that's sorry. I had hearing you before the show started. I have had very similar experiences, especially growing up here, Black, but like in the early 2000s.
Right.
It was me. I was it.
Yeah.
And like and there was a lot of like there were other people from different demographics, but I'm like 6'3", outspoken, loudly dressed. Like, so even if I try and fit into like other demographics, I'm like, no, no, you're American. No, so it's really cool to hear that.
Yeah, I think I did struggle a lot when I was young about belonging. Especially being very, very Kiwi. Like, that's kind of all I've ever known. What
age were you when you came to New Zealand?
I was 2.
Right. So
so I have no memory at all of Somalia. And a lot of this book, people say it's a lot of sensory stuff. I think it's because I take inspiration from my mum, and she cooks, and I think food is the biggest connection you can have to national culture is food. So I can find myself naturally just writing about food, or how something tastes, or how my mum cooked something. And that's just like, my belonging is through food. So I try really hard to connect to my roots in the collection, but I also found myself writing mostly to my younger self. And so a lot of these poems, I say you a lot. It's just me when
meaning
I was 15.
Yourself.
It was just me when I was 15, but you can take it however you want. So a lot of the poems some are very angry and some are very soft. I think there's parts of myself that I'm very angry at, and there's parts of myself that I wish I could nurture. So it's more of a poem. I think more of a collection about me, my past self, my experiences, than anything else.
I think as the show goes on, that's something I would really love to open up with you, is just being Black, angry, and poetic at the same time. Like, where you're like, oh no, it's not like I'm gonna go out and punch somebody. I'm just carrying so much rage, and only poetry can contain it.
Yeah. I had a convo with a good friend of mine, and we were talking about just how much anger fuels our poetry.
Yes.
And she's a person of colour as well, and we had a really, really great convo about it. But I think as I've grown older, I've gotten a little softer.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is just I've accepted the situation, I've accepted my role, I've accepted my life, and kind of just tired of it all, I guess.
Well, I think it's not just that. I honestly think that when you don't have an outlet for anger, it becomes toxic. It absolutely corrupts you. Like, it's poison in you. And if you have like a poetic outlet, like, everybody's going to get a little bit angry, but if you're in the Black community, or not even just the Black community, if you've come from a hard past, you have a valid reason to be angry, and you need to let it out.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Finding healthy channels, that's a different story.
Yeah, I think the fact that I've mellowed out a lot of it's because I've written it all out and let it all out. I think now all that remains is just acceptance, and it's kind of like, okay. It's all out now.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Like, poetry has a long history of doing that for people. Like,
definitely, yeah.
And so I hear you talk about writing novels, and I know that there's a long history of novels being frustrated and angry. And so, like, I hear you say, you're like, because poetry's easy. I've heard lots of people have the complete opposite experience.
I know, it's actually kind of insane, because so I used to do long form fiction. So I used to write a lot, but I actually found it really
I still want to ask
difficult.
you so many questions. Like, so tell me what your long form fiction is, but I'll keep
But a lot of that I found myself really lost in novels, because I mean, I've completed maybe 2, but I've started a bunch, and I often get very, very lost in the character. What am I trying to say? What is this going? Whereas with poetry, you can just start and finish a poem on the same page. Yeah. So I found it actually it's a lot easier to express myself in this little section than it is to express myself over 300 pages.
Precisely.
Yeah. So for me, because I know a lot of people write novels and poetry, they don't understand it, they don't get it, they don't want to get it. Yeah. But for me, it was I think I've just always wanted to express myself, because, like I said, I was a very introverted kid. Yeah. I was very, very soft spoken, and so I think I've always wanted people to know what I was thinking. And with poetry, I was able to do it in an easy kind of way. I mean, this collection's tiny, but I think it says so much. Yeah.
No, so I've written a similar style of book. Like, I'm like reading through your poetry, I'm like, oh, we have the same writing style. That's cool. Like, or at least very similarly shaped. Like, you know, the sort of spacing the words so they're like only a handful of very concise. I was
thinking like on that kind of style, that sort of things. That obviously you mentioned that you feel like you write from quite a sensory kind of perspective.
Yes.
Like, what kind of other stylistic sort of thing? Like, things that make up your kind of your style.
I often say, like, the poetry you like the best is probably the poetry you kind of write, right? So a poet that I love so much is Danny Smith, who's a queer poet who's African American and often writes about their whakapapa and where they come from. And so I read their poetry, it's very romantic, very sensory. Yes. And they talk a lot about brutalization in a very romantic kind of way. Yeah. And it's almost like, ooh, but oh my god, I can't stop reading. Yeah. And so I find myself often replicating that in my writing, so my writing is often very romantic. Yeah. Even though I'm talking about things that are not that great. Yeah. Or very sensory. And I think I like describing things in ways that are not often that you wouldn't think of describing them in.
I think it's like that whole romance, but you could also just say very intimate. Like sometimes, like when you have like a really, not necessarily traumatic, but like a really hard to process moment in your life. Yeah. Unpacking it, like, but unfolding it in a very intimate, like not quite disconnected way can go so far. So it's so cool to hear you say that, because those are the exact kinds of poems that I'm scared to publish, because I'm like, okay, are we making this sound too nice? Right. Are we softening it too much?
Yeah. Like, I had a question about the March 15th series of poems you've got in there. You've kind of done that in those poems with the last line of each one of them, and I sort of, it made me really think.
You'll probably have to do it. Is it this one there?
Yeah, is that the one from March 15th? What is it? The one that I underlined at the bottom.
I didn't want him to take me under.
Yeah, that whole idea of, you know, the way people were absorbing and projecting onto you what had
Yeah.
happened in March 15th.
Yes.
Was that the intention of that line, was to kind of evoke that
Yeah.
that anger, but in a nice way?
Yeah, I think the March 15 poem is an example of me trying to talk about something horrific in a very romantic way. Because this is just my experience, obviously. People in Christchurch had a very different experience.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a time filled with a lot of sadness.
Yeah.
But also, it was just before Ramadan, so
Right.
it was just So in those series, it's only 4 pages.
Yeah.
It reads like a short story, but it is very poetic, and a lot of it is very romantic writing. So flowers and curry and that kind of thing. So I try and do that. I don't think I do it intentionally. It just happens to be that way. And when I read back, I'm like, oh, there we go. Yeah, that's me explaining something kind of horrific or sad or tragic. In this very romantic kind of way.
Do you feel like that kind of comes to you naturally, like the sort of because everybody sort of has this. I've noticed poetry is almost like an on switch or an off switch, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think I just naturally have find myself writing about things in a very descriptive, sensory way, because that's what I like when I read it. Or poems, when I read a poem and I say I really like this, it's because that poem is very sensory or romantic, or you use certain words that evoke things, and so I think I'm like, without even thinking it, I just kind of replicate it into my own work.
Like there's a I can't remember the word in Japanese, but it basically translates to feel like a word that feels good in your mouth. Like like it's sort of like textural, right? Like you can almost taste it, like like if you pull out a sword, it goes shing, and you can taste it in your mouth, and it's like quite crispy and lemony, you know, like versus like clump, which you're like, ooh, that's like brown and like maybe like brown and like kind of gritty, and so there's this sort of different words where you can actually taste them and feel them, and almost like they're
they just take you somewhere.
They take you somewhere, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I had another question, which was like, so when you write, are you straight to computer or?
So before I published, I used to write all the time. So usually on a laptop, I used to have a Google Doc. That was several pages long. I used to just scroll to the bottom and write something. Scroll to the bottom and write something. But I think since publishing, writing, I've been so disconnected from my own writing, but writing in general. And so I have decided to not write on my computer and try and write on a notebook. But yeah, I think
like a proper
like a pen and paper. But I think since publishing, I've just grown very very insecure about my writing, but also very fragile.
Oh my god!
And
but you're number one. How can you be insecure?
No, that's exactly why. Like that means all eyes are on you. So if you stumble. No, I had a simple. So I've even got my next 2 books in the chamber. They just need to even file. But I've been like so anxious about them for exactly that same reason.
And did we mention that you were number one? Have we mentioned that yet?
Oh yeah, no, we have not.
Yeah.
So when I published the first week, my book was number 1 in Wellington Unity Books bestsellers chart.
Wow.
So that's quite amazing.
Congratulations.
Quite a moment for me. I was really excited, and I told my parents they were very excited. And my book was almost sold out in Unity and most of the stores. So that was quite exciting. But I think that was when the insecurity just fueled within me, and I was like, oh my god, there's all these people reading my book. Yeah.
Not to mention that there's a whole bunch of people bought it, but what do they think, right? And you get all up in your head about it, and you're immediately thinking of, that one chapter, that time I said that one thing, what if somebody's and you're just like,
Well, people I know.
Yeah, exactly.
What are they gonna think it's about them? Are they gonna think about it? And I'm just like, oh my god, here we go. But it's like,
That's so welly though that they think it's about them.
Oh
yes, I know her. I did this with her. Oh my god.
Like I said, it's so hard because I've had such similar experiences that I'm like, oh man, this is wonderful to connect over. Because there were several different lines in my book which sound like call-out posts, and they kind of are because they were experiences that I had. But I'm like, oh, you know what? I bet you such and such probably thinks I was talking about them, but I was not. Actually, I was the reference was to this experience, but it's sort of not even to any one person. It's to the experience, whether that came from them or not.
Yeah, and I think some of this book, most of this collection actually, is from a person that I'm not anymore.
Yes.
So I feel, sometimes I read this and I'm like, oh wow, I respect who this girl was who finished this book. Because I wrote this when I was 23, I'm 25 now.
Yeah.
So it's like, I respect her a lot, and I enjoy her writing.
Yeah.
She has a lot to say, but I'm not her anymore.
Yeah.
So having her writing in the world, and I think I'm scared of people reading it thinking I'm still her.
Yeah.
And that's
Yes.
often kind of scary.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of this that is not me anymore.
I think that that's actually one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk to you about like writing and anger and being like black and female and the stereotypes that go with it.
Yeah.
Is because if you tell people you have to disconnect from your anger or
Yeah.
any emotion,
Yeah.
it's gonna just seed in there and grow into
Yeah.
something huge. But it's like I need to find a healthy way to express this. If I live in a society where I can't even write it in poetry,
Yeah.
in veiled terms, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
I'm not mentioning names, there's nobody involved. And so I'm so happy to hear other women writing angry poetry. I'm like, do it. Get your I advocate journals so completely.
Yeah.
I don't care if you take me personally and rip me apart in your journal, because that means the next time you see me, you'll probably be so chill.
Exactly. There's a lot of angry poetry in here.
Yeah.
And if you want me to share with you.
Yes.
Oh, I
That'd be
just love that.
fantastic.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Yes,
I'll
please.
share this one with you, which again is a poem that I wrote with, I was very angry.
Yeah.
I was young.
Yeah.
But sometimes I read this back and I think, oh man, she was going through it. But like, I'm not her anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's called If I Go Back. So if I go back to where I came from, I will take everything with me. My mason jars with fireflies, my golden bangles, my morning coffee. I will take my earth, my horned melons, and stories of Cleopatra. I will take that rug, the one you love so much, with the golden tassels and delicately picked butterfly wings. I will take my turmeric, my henna, my lemongrass, and my acacia leaves. I will take my language, heavy and soft in the palms of my hands. I will tuck my Afrobeats and hip-hop in my back pocket. I'll carry the moon in my bindle, my chocolate in a Ziploc bag. I'll carry my baobab and the cashew only in my backpack. And then you'll be left with naked kings and queens with concave bellies and hollow scooped out eyes, because their fancy fabric, thin sclera and jewel crowns belong to me too. Amma Ata Aida once said, what would the world be without Africa? And I think I know now. It would no longer grow roses. It would be void of lyrical worthy sweet orange pulp that melts on my tongue. The earth would be scaly and dry. The wind would not whistle. There would be a dent in the air every time you took a breath. There would be no myriad of reds and purples dancing across the sky.
Ooh, snaps, full snaps.
But I think
Poetry snaps.
that is a good example of a poem that I wrote when I was very angry, but still tried very hard to be romantic about my anger.
Yeah.
And, the message I was trying to say, and try and like almost make it soft, so that when you read it, it's soft, but it's also the softness almost like
can cut. It was cutting. Yeah.
It's the rose and the thorns, exactly.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
It's the rose and the thorns. It's like
Yeah.
I know that you usually strip your roses of thorns, but please remember.
Yeah. And that poem was one that I kept taking out, putting back in.
Oh.
And my editor kept going like, "Do you want this or not?" And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of one of my favourite poets. Had a thing where it was one of those points where someone must have come up to him and said, "Oh, this poem of yours, like it, in terms," and I guess that's one of the things looking at like how it's received, right? Is that kind of space of he was like, "This poem might change your life," and this guy was like, "Oh, it's not very one of my very good ones." And, he was like, and this guy got really angry. He was like, "How dare you say that? This is such," and I always think like that's almost the other side of the thing, and I guess it's one of those difficult spaces to be in as a writer, right? It's like that sort of that obviously that like for you like that kind of humming and ahhing, does this go and does this not? But then it's sort of those points of it, and obviously that's the kind of difficulty in some ways, right? Because what makes something that is you having a conversation with your younger self.
Exactly.
But then obviously other people are going to kind of look into that and
receive something completely different.
Yeah.
Okay. First off, that poem slaps so hard.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it was
Thank you so much.
beautiful.
I love the way that you use those ideas softly to say that if I have to go back home, I'm taking all of this with me. I mean, it's just reminded me of that whole Cardi B thing, forever, But I love that idea. Like, I actually love that idea of being able to express anger at somebody saying, go back to where you came from
Yeah.
in that way.
So then I'll take my mathematics then.
Would you like me to take my algebra with me? I'm just, putting that out there. Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Especially, I like the roses and the chocolate and the way that you wove all of these things that feel like almost very European.
Yeah.
Because they've been in European culture for so long. I think a lot of people don't even know where they come from.
Exactly.
So then, you say roses and chocolate and, algebra, etc. And you're just and they're like, wait, no, those are our things. They're like, no, they're not though.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was thinking we might jump into a bit of music for
Yes,
a brief moment in time, and then we'll come back with some more hot conversations. Okay, so first up we have Solar Plexus from Ocean, and we have Ecstasy from Jal. I'm pretty sure Jal is, I can't remember exactly where he's from, but he's based in Aussie. He's an Australian, I think, I can't remember if he's Haitian, but the Haitian guy. But no, so yeah, with Ecstasy from Jal, I'll have a look into that and I'll tell you after the break. So we have Solar Plexus Emotion and Ecstasy from Jal, and we'll see. And we are back on the Blackhouse 106.1 FM in conversation today with Khadro Mohamed. That was, oh sorry, I forgot, it was Bad and Clean by Frisco and Infamous Isaac. I threw in another song there, I was just like...
Plexus are always so tight, Eddie. They're beautiful. Thank you very much.
I mean, it's like...
I actually want to see...
It's like I get paid to do it.
I actually want to see you more on the turntables and on the decks around Wellington.
Agreed. Snaps.
I do. I feel like it's just... I'm trying to work out, I think the thing for me was when I was in my second year uni, I was DJing regularly, and then I kind of got to the end of the year, and then I kind of stuck around into Dunedin working, and it just kind of hit this point where I was doing 10 to 4 a.m.
The whole lot.
4 to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Right.
3 nights a week, and then I was working in retail, and I had my shifts would start at 11, so I get. So I just it's. And it's tough because obviously I'm working full time now, so it's trying to hit that balance of trying to do gigs and obviously having a bit of passive income and do some kind of cool stuff, but also not overdo it.
Yeah, I like that idea that you have a DJ on for an hour or 2 hours, and then they switch up and have another DJ, and that whole thing you were talking about a while ago about you can then plan your night by following the DJs that play the music that you want to hear. I think that's I think that Wellington bars should do that more often.
And I've noticed a little bit, I did see, and maybe it was with Vic, I saw a poster for their kind of reorientation or whatever, but it was that kind of thing. It was okay, here are the hip-hop artists who are coming to this. Here are the surf rock artists that are coming to this. Here are the drum and bass DJs that are coming to this. Because it was just it gives you that kind of idea of, okay, here are the genres, here's what if you want to hear these things, come to these places at these times.
Yeah.
And I think also the big part of it is that I think ultimately New Zealand doesn't have that kind of quite club scene in the same way that I remember when I was in the UK and I was in London, that was the thing, they don't quite have that kind of that club model that I think would support that kind of shifting DJ kind of model.
I really like that a lot more than going to a bar and having the same music for the whole night. It really
it's sort of almost if you have a menu at every restaurant, of course if you go to an Indian place you're going to get mostly Indian, but you're not just going to get the butter chicken. I mean, some people do, but don't know. I'm sorry, Wellington. I see the way you guys order an Indian takeaways. I'm just it's all butter chicken, chicken korma, and.
I just think the whole thing of the mild butter chicken. I just sit and go I get the whole not necessarily need one of the spice level, but there's just such a range.
Yeah.
Get everything.
Seriously.
Get into the range.
I'm just you know what I mean, right? Sorry, I love it whenever you order something that's not butter chicken from the menu, and the attendant kind of looks at you ooh, you're special. I see you're a man of taste. Sorry. Not sorry. So
back to Khadro. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about, your publishing experience and how you walk through that, and what would your advice be to, burgeoning authors. Burgeoning. I had to find a fancy word because Nanny comes up with them all the time while I'm scrambling around in brain fog. But anyway,
I was really lucky. I just got solicited for a manuscript. So, like I said, a friend of mine, she and her partner had a shop, food court books in Newtown, and then they wanted to also get a press, and so they asked me and a few others for a manuscript. They said, hey, if you're working on a manuscript, we've got a press we want to publish. Do you want to be the first batch of authors to go? And so I was like, I don't know if I want to publish, but if I was, I would definitely do it with my friend, a very good friend as well. So I was like, okay, well, I've got a manuscript. It's not perfect, but okay, I'll do it. So I was actually really, really lucky. But before I got asked, I promised myself that I wouldn't publish until I was like a bit older, maybe 30, because unfortunately the New Zealand publishing scene is very Pākehā and male dominated.
Yeah.
And often the narratives I look for from people of colour is that trauma stuff and like.
Tell us why we don't want to go to where you come from.
Tell us how awful it is for you from.
And how special it is to be in New Zealand and being asked about your trauma every 24 minutes.
Exactly, very that.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, if I'm going to publish, it's going to be when I'm older, when I'm a little bit more established as a writer, I'm going to have my own website and I can say yes and no and blah, 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 and I know myself a little bit better. But I was really lucky to be asked by my friend, and We Are Babies Press is a very, very, almost self-led, so I got to pick which poem stayed, I got to pick which poem went. I had an editor who edited things, but not in a take this out and put this in, more this word, maybe change it to that word, this poem would flow better if you use this word, very just constructive feedback, but there was no take this out, put this in. It was very, what do you want? Okay, let's make it better. And it was a really, really simple process, and I was really lucky. And even the cover, I was like, I have a really specific idea for my cover, and I'd like my friend to do it. And they're like, yep, cool. If you've got a friend who can make you a cover, go get it. And I was like, cool. So it was really, and I know there's a lot of presses, I'm not going to name names, but there's certain presses in New Zealand, particularly Wellington, who are very specific about everything, who will take your manuscript. I've submitted manuscripts before where people go, it's great, but can you take out all the poems when you talk about yourself? Take out all the poems when you're talking about racism, because we don't like that.
Do you think that's a Wellington thing?
I think it's a New Zealand thing.
Is it?
But I think Wellington's interesting because I think it's the home of art. So
Apparently.
It's the home of the literature. So IMIL, the Modern Letters School, and the UP, the biggest publishing house. They're all here, right? So a lot of people. So if you make it in Wellington, you've kind of made it. I think. So So the Wellington publishing scene, I think, kind of sets a good tone. For the rest. And so my experience with Wellington presses have been not too great. And I think it must be the same elsewhere, unless you go to independent press. Because I did Bird Books is also quite great.
I would, can I add to that, like, by just saying my experience is very similar. What I've actually found is it's the youngest, most fresh, like, working through social media and international publishing companies that actually do accept you being like, I'm going to tell my whole story. And I think that it's not just Wellington or local or international. It's like a generational thing. Because like we come from the generation of social media where if you've got secrets, they're on the internet. That gossip is already the beans are spilled. The gossip is out. The cat is out of the bag, right? And so like there's almost this clean line from a generation who's like, oh no, what if this scandal gets out? To the like, I suppose like almost post-Trump area, like, oh god, if we don't have any scandals, how are we gonna sell anything? Right? Like, right? So if you have nothing like I suppose edgy, like, and it doesn't have to be like engineered, but like if there's nothing about you that's like worth protecting as a publishing company, you might as well put it on your Instagram. Like, why are we protecting you?
No, that's true, and I do find that the press. A lot of the presses in New Zealand often publish the same kind of writing, so they all like this. When it comes to poetry, a lot of them like specific poetry. Then they have the few special kids who are like, a few Māori voices here, and a few Pacifica voices here, and a few one Arab guy here, and it's like, okay, that's done with the flavour, and then everyone else, the Pākehā people, that's like, you go into these events, I walk into. I'm often advised to so many readings, and I'm always the only person of colour. Unless I make that, I have hosted readings where I wasn't. But unless I do it, I'm always the only person of colour in the room.
You're reminding me of my experience in Taranaki, because my oldest son's father is an artist. He's a Pacific Island artist, and he's quite well known within his community. And I kind of felt that way when we used to set him up for exhibits, and we'd paint all the walls of a warehouse or something and hang up all the artwork and install all the installations, and then it became a very white experience.
Yes.
And I literally watched, well, I've already said who he is. He's my son's father. But I literally watched him change.
Yes.
Like in the way that like he would interact with these people, and for me it was quite eye-opening. Even though I did do art school in Taranaki, I never could get into that.
It's really interesting.
That
I find
that pretentiousness
Yeah.
and the fawning.
The little Lord Fauntleroy, like certain someone dressed up like the Lord Fauntleroy.
Well, it wasn't even about appearance. It was demeanor and the way that you talked and the way that his accent sometimes changed, and that was kind of, and you know, and he's still got an accent to this day, and I'm just like, you managed to change it for all those people.
Almost like a sort of Pacific Island version of code switching, which I have absolutely seen.
Yeah.
I don't know, I kind of, a bit like in the queer community, it's like not okay to out people. I kind of understand, like you don't understand how dangerous it is out here. We have to have that protective layer of code switching. And I do actually have more respect for that than you might think. And I almost feel like my ability to weave from my experiences, you know, my family, like, were in California before this. It was all like boy shirts and like, you know, surfboards, like, so I kind of really get that. And if you're like out there and you have that, one of the things you can find with invalidating that code switching experience is it almost like forces you to invalidate your blackness if you have to do it. And I almost want to be like, if you find yourself in those spaces where you have to, you're still black. It's okay. You can come back. It's fine.
It's really interesting, I think, because in the publishing world, I should say poetry. In the poetry scene, which is very different to the writing scene, I think so. It's very, very queer, which is great. But it's also very Pākehā, which no one ever really talks about. And it's interesting because me and another friend, a really good friend, an amazing poet, Ronia Ibrahim, you should check her out. Me and her are kind of a duo. She's Muslim as well. She's Sri Lankan and Taiwanese. And me and her kind of are on the same vibe, because oftentimes if me and her are making events together, if we're not collabing together, we are the only people of colour in the room. And it's frustrating sometimes, because I'm frustrated by that. But I've seen a lot of people of colour who lean into it. So a lot of them will say, you know, a lot of them will be the only person of colour in the room, but they like it. They write from that. They really lean into it. And I get it, because I think this poetry seems really Pākehā. And if you're lucky enough to find the formula to make it as a person of colour, you're going to keep it. And who am I to judge? I
mean, like what you're saying, my son's father's a very successful artist throughout the Pacific. And it's because he could adapt like that. You know?
So it's in this art scene where it's very saturated, and you manage to make it as a person of colour, you manage to make it with your art, you're going to keep it, because people already gave you that platform because of the way you write, you're going to stay that way. And I'm equally frustrated, but I also accept it, because I accept it, okay, if you're the only Muslim, you're the only black person, you're the only woman who wears a scarf in a room, and you've managed to make success and your name for yourself through maybe invalidating yourself, invalidating your own, whatever you need to do to make it, you've done it. I can't judge that.
Not from a perspective of judging or invalidating, but just having to do that. Do you think that you, like, I know that myself, I can't do that. I'm like the person in the room that will call a spade a spade. I know myself well enough now, and I'm wondering is that a stage for some people to actually get to a point where they can actually do that, and that's accepted, and then that becomes what gives you your success? Because I always feel like, for me, even with my writing, and when I'm code switching in my writing, I'm going, I don't want to do this. I want to say what I mean and mean what I say and mean what I think, and I want that to be the thing that you take with you, and you read this and you go, okay, you know, like how much of this is like us kind of bowing into that stuff, like you said, leaning into it.
I think like you have to make that decision yourself. But I think the longer I've been in poetry, the more I realise that being in the poetry scene demands something of me that I cannot give.
Yeah.
And so I can't give into, I'm often asked to do readings in bars, or I'm told to come in and talk, because a lot of people like my poetry, but I feel like they like a certain type of my poetry. They don't like all of my poetry. And so a lot of times I'm invited to these events, and I've been finding myself saying no more and more and more, because I'm always like, no, I actually don't want to be in a bar at 6 o'clock at night as a Muslim woman in a room full of drunk people.
And then offend them, and the next thing bottles are flying.
And it's like, I don't want to be in that situation, and I shouldn't have to be. And so for me, it's like, okay, I've made the decision to say, okay, I'm going to try and write this thing authentically and genuinely as I can. And to remain genuine and authentic to myself, I have to say no to a lot of things that might propel me further into the poetry scene.
Yeah.
Well,
Is it
sorry.
almost that kind of question that sometimes, and it's, you see it on like a macro level with hip hop, where you look at like where a lot of rappers write for it is writing of their experience, but and like for in ideas that are largely based around their experience and stuff that they're people from your community, from those backgrounds get, like there's that implicit understanding. But obviously when you take it onto a big stage, like you look at it's always, you look at it in the gangster rap, you go like the biggest gangster rap fans were white suburban kids, and it's that same kind of thing of like
more like the largest audience of white suburban kids, but like the people who really knew you were like the smaller audience.
Is it almost that kind of similar sort of thing in a poetry space, where especially in terms of non people of color in those kind of poetry spaces, it's almost that same sort of thing as that.
You have to compartmentalize yourself. But I'm actually starting to feel like that's not just true amongst white, black, or whatever audiences. It's like no matter what space I have to go in, I have to chop some part of me off. Which is something that I'm wondering if you just feel that, like, no matter what space, even if you're in an all-black space, like, now I'm cutting off my queer part because I'm scared of, like, how that's going to be received, or, you know, like, or I have to cut off my female, like, my more flamboyant feminine self.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating for me because Wellington is, quote-unquote very progressive.
Yeah.
And I think they're so progressive, it's almost... What's the word? Backwards.
Actually, like me and a friend of mine have been calling it progressive regression.
Progressive is regressive because they often cheer on queer voices in the scene, which is great. But where are the queer voices of colour? They're often left out. They'll say we want people of colour to talk, but they never accommodate. So it's like you want me to read. So, that, for example, this is what's happened to me multiple times: is people will put together a lineup. And that lineup will be almost all white. And they'll say, we need a diverse voice. And Khadro's a diverse
Let's go pick Khadro out of the lineup.
And let's put Khadro in our lineup so we can see diverse.
Yeah.
Also give her koha. So it's like, at first, when you're starting off, you take what you can get. But I feel like, okay, I'm a published author now. I think I deserve a little bit more than just a koha. I don't want to be the only person of colour in your lineup. And I don't want to be in a situation where I'm the only woman of colour, I'm the only Muslim, I'm in a bar, it's 7 o'clock on a Saturday night. And it's like, okay, I'm uncomfortable. But they have almost the audacity to ask me is like astonishing, because I'm just like...
It's like they're not think like it's that kind of thing of like diversity, but like obviously...
Just completely disregard Khadro's
there's the things that are entailed in that. It's not just about presence. It's about if you want it to be like a diverse lineup and to accommodate that, you have to acknowledge the aspects of that are going to make that a space for someone to perform in.
Exactly. Right? So to ask to say, so the next time you ask a Muslim woman of colour to come perform for you, make it not in a bar. Something simple, like just thinking.
What do you think? What do you think is the way that? Well, you're just about to say that, but say what my question is about. Would be the best way to actually change this kind of scene here.
That's my question as well. Like I always ask people is just like, what's your vision? Like I don't care what the problems are. What's your vision? Tell me what you want.
Last year I was really lucky enough. Do you guys know the Kia Mau Festival? Which is a Māori and Pacifica centered festival in Wellington that takes part in Wellington every 2 years. And so they asked us to curate an event where, as poets, they were like, you guys are poets, curate an event, here's some money, do whatever you want. So they asked people of colour.
Yeah.
So they approached us.
Yeah.
2, they gave us the money to do it. And
Yeah.
3, they said, you can do whatever you want. Here's our numbers if you need resources. So
Awesome.
things like giving money to the right group of people so they can
Yeah.
make something happen.
And
Yeah.
not taking the lead, letting them take the lead,
not
right?
thinking you know what they want.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so where are we at?
I think so. We got a minute 50 now.
Yeah.
I
I
just have.
can share a poem.
Yes,
that'd be really
perfect.
fantastic. That'd be really good.
Okay, it's called Love Letter to the Motherland, Part 3. It's 5 different parts. This is Part 3. In sub-Saharan Africa, an elephant climbs a bridge that straddles 2 worlds. One where you know me, and one where I do not exist. Do you know what it's like to live on land that loves you back? Land where it rains twice and lulls you to sleep. I am from a land that loves me more than I deserve to be loved. I taught you how to speak my tongue, how to position your lips so that each letter comes out crisp. Still, you couldn't even pronounce my name without choking. You make it disappear every time you speak. Isn't it funny that Belgium and Sweden and New Zealand get to be the face of chocolate, even though the beans only sing for Ghana? I think that's kind of funny. Your arms are the only place left in the world, so let me float away into space.
Thank you.
Woo! Snaps.
Snap, snap.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Like, this has been,
Thank you for having
it's been
me.
really nice, and it's been real. Like, I love talking about poetry.
I know. It has
I
been-
want to talk about your novels. Can you come back again?
Yeah, I know, right? It has been such an honour and a pleasure to meet
Oh, thank
you.
you so much.
Like,
It's
your
been
poetry
such
is
a lovely.
gorgeous.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so lovely to.
Where can we
Yes.
find this book?
Everywhere where good books are sold, but particularly Unity books.
You do books.
There's always a copy at Unity Books.
Excellent. All right. Make sure that you
Grab your
of this
copy.
book.
Yep.
Have we mentioned the name? Like,
We're all made of
we're,
lightning.
we're all made of lightning.
I love this cover art.
I
wish
know,
I
right?
want to talk a bit more about it, but again, you don't have to come back. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so this
Do
is
some more poetry reading. There's no problem with that.
we should do a Blackhouse poetry slam.
Yep,
This has been the
absolutely.
Blackhouse 106.1 FM with Eddie, Nani, Leah, and our guest Khadro Mohamed. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
We'll
you
see you guys
so
next
much.
week. Peace.